You think African American weddings in the 1960s were simple affairs with basic food? Think again. Black communities across America created some of the most ingenious, flavorful, and love-filled reception spreads on tight budgets. Let's dig into 30 cheap dishes that made 1960s black weddings unforgettable. Chicken salad finger sandwiches were the elegant centerpiece of many 1960s African American wedding receptions, transforming humble ingredients into something celebratory. Church mothers stretched a single boiled chicken across dozens of sandwiches by finely chopping the meat and mixing it with mayonnaise, celery, and pickle relish. The mixture was spread onto soft white bread with crust trimmed away, then cut into triangles guests could eat in a few bites. Arranged on borrowed platters covered with paper doilies, these sandwiches looked far more expensive than they were. The chicken salad had to be creamy but not wet, seasoned with salt, pepper, and sometimes lemon. Women guarded their proportions closely. For many families, these sandwiches represented the bridge between everyday cooking and special occasion elegance. Cheese straws appeared on nearly every wedding reception table in the 1960s South, their golden twisted shapes adding elegance and flavor to the spread. Made from sharp cheddar, flour, butter, and cayenne pepper, these crispy treats were labor-intensive but worth every minute. Women grated cheese by hand, worked the dough smooth, then pressed it through cookie presses or rolled and cut it into strips. The straws baked until golden and slightly puffed, filling kitchens with an irresistible aroma of cheese and spice. They were packed carefully in tins lined with wax paper. At receptions, guests reached for them repeatedly, savoring the combination of sharp cheese and gentle heat. Too much butter made them greasy, while too little left them dry, so skill mattered greatly. They symbolized the dedication that went into every celebration. Church pound cake was the wedding dessert that needed no frosting because its buttery richness required no embellishment. Named for the traditional ratio of 1 pound each of butter, sugar, eggs, and flour, this dense golden cake became the foundation of countless 1960s wedding tables. Church mothers baked them in loaf pans or bundt molds, the batter beaten by hand until light and smooth. The secret was in the mixing, creaming butter and sugar until pale, adding eggs one at a time, folding flour gently. Fresh from the oven, the cake developed a thin crust, giving way to tender crumb inside. Some added vanilla or almond extract, others buttermilk for tang. Sliced thick on platters, pound cake satisfied without overwhelming. It was affordable, reliable, and always welcome. Red fruit punch flowed freely at every 1960s African American wedding reception, its bright color symbolizing celebration in communities where red drinks carried deep cultural significance. The punch was mixed in large bowls or borrowed fountains, combining fruit juices with ginger ale for sparkle. Recipes varied, but often included Hawaiian punch, cranberry juice, pineapple juice, and sherbet that floated on top, melting into creamy swirls. The drink had to be cold, chilled with ice rings frozen the night before to avoid diluting flavor. Young cousins were assigned punch duty, keeping cups filled throughout the reception. The color mattered as much as taste, that distinctive red connecting celebration to traditions stretching back generations. A cup of red punch meant welcome and festivity. Ham biscuits were the savory anchor of 1960s wedding receptions, small enough to eat standing, yet satisfying enough to sustain guests through hours of celebration. Country ham, sliced paper thin and fried briefly to bring out its salty richness, was tucked inside tender buttermilk biscuits made fresh that morning. The biscuits had to be flaky and soft, split while warm, and spread with butter before receiving the ham. Some families added mustard or honey for sweetness that balanced the salt. These were assembled by dozens in church kitchens, wrapped in cloth to keep warm, then arranged on platters before guests arrived. Ham biscuits required coordination between cooks, one team handling biscuits while another managed the ham. They proved that modest budgets could produce food that made people feel truly loved and welcomed. Mustard potato salad held a place of honor at 1960s African-American wedding receptions, its tangy yellow color brightening tables alongside other dishes. Unlike mayonnaise-heavy versions, this style relied on prepared yellow mustard for its tang, mixed with chopped hard-boiled eggs, pickle relish, and diced celery and onion. The potatoes were boiled until just tender, never mushy, then cubed while warm so they absorbed the dressing better. Some cooks added sugar to balance the mustard's sharpness, while others preferred bold pucker. The salad was made a day ahead so flavors could meld overnight, then served cold in large bowls. Children often avoided it, preferring sweeter options, but adults returned for seconds. For many families, the potato salad recipe was as precious as the wedding dress, passed down through generations of cooks. Candied yams glistened on 1960s wedding reception tables, their sweet orange surfaces catching the light and drawing guests toward the serving line. Sweet potatoes were peeled, sliced thick, and layered in baking dishes with brown sugar, butter, and spices like cinnamon and nutmeg. As they baked low and slow, the sugar melted into syrup, coating each slice with sticky sweetness. Some cooks added orange juice or pineapple for brightness, while others kept it simple to let the potatoes shine. The dish had to be served warm, its fragrance mixing with other foods to create the distinctive smell of celebration. Candied yams connected wedding tables to holiday traditions, bringing comfort and familiarity. They were affordable yet indulgent, proving that simple ingredients handled with care could produce something extraordinary. Sweet potato pie was often the only dessert rivaling the wedding cake itself, its spiced filling and flaky crust representing generations of baking knowledge. The sweet potatoes were roasted until tender, then mashed smooth with butter, sugar, eggs, and spices, including cinnamon, nutmeg, and vanilla. The filling was poured into homemade crust and baked until set, the top turning golden and slightly cracked at the edges. Each family had their own recipe, guarded closely and revealed only to daughters deemed worthy of the knowledge. The pies were often made by the bride's mother or grandmother, their presence on the table a stamp of family tradition. Sliced thin to serve more guests, sweet potato pie was eaten alongside wedding cake or instead of it. Its familiar taste carried more meaning than any fancy frosted confection could. Banana pudding with meringue crowned many 1960s wedding dessert tables, its golden peaks and creamy layers drawing admiration before the first spoonful was served. The pudding was cooked slowly on the stovetop, eggs and milk and sugar stirred constantly until thick and silky. Vanilla wafers were layered with sliced bananas and pudding in large dishes, each tier soaking into the one below until everything melded together. The meringue was whipped by hand until stiff, spread across the top, and browned under the broiler until peaks formed. Timing mattered. Made close enough to serving that meringue stayed high, but early enough for layers to soften. Women earned reputation based on their banana pudding, with invitations sometimes accepted specifically because a certain cook was providing dessert. It represented patience, skill, and love. Tea. Cakes appeared at wedding receptions as symbols of continuity. These simple cookies connecting the celebration to generations of family traditions, made from flour, butter, sugar, eggs, and a touch of nutmeg or vanilla. They were mixed by hand and rolled on floured counters. Each cookie was cut round and baked until just set, never browned, producing soft discs that yielded gently to the bite. Tea cakes were not overly sweet, making them perfect alongside punch or coffee without overwhelming the palate. Many brides requested them specifically because their grandmothers had served tea cakes at their own weddings decades before. The recipe varied by family, some adding nutmeg, while others preferred lemon zest. Arranged on platters or packed into tins, tea cakes whispered of heritage and keeping traditions alive. Stuffed celery sticks lined reception tables like edible decorations, their pale green boats filled with cream cheese, mixtures guests could grab with one hand while greeting the bride. The celery was trimmed and cut into lengths, the natural hollow filled with softened cream cheese mixed with chopped olives, pimentos, or crushed nuts. Some cooks added Worcestershire sauce or paprika for depth. The filled stalks were arranged on platters in neat rows, sometimes garnished with parsley. This was budget-friendly elegance, transforming cheap vegetables into something pretty. Women prepared dozens the night before, covering them with damp cloths to keep them crisp. The crunch of celery against creamy filling provided contrast guests appreciated. Stuffed celery represented the fussiness that made weddings feel special. Collard greens, simmered with ham hocks, brought soul and substance to 1960s African-American wedding receptions, their deep green color representing home and heritage. The greens were washed multiple times to remove grit, stripped from stems, and cooked low and slow with smoked ham hocks that flavored every leaf. Onions, garlic, and a splash of vinegar balanced the richness, while a pinch of sugar softened any bitterness. The greens cooked for hours until silky tender, served with cooking liquid spooned over top. Guests ladled portions onto plates alongside other dishes, the familiar taste grounding celebration in everyday comfort. Collards were inexpensive and stretched far, one large batch feeding dozens. This dish connected wedding joy to Sunday dinner tradition, reminding everyone that celebration and home cooking belong together. Fried chicken wings piled high on platters were the finger foods that disappeared fastest at 1960s wedding receptions, their crispy coating and tender meat satisfying guests of all ages. Wings were the cheapest part of the chicken, often sold in bulk at prices whole birds could not match. Seasoned with salt, pepper, garlic powder, and paprika, then dredged in flour and fried in cast iron until golden, the wings emerged crackling hot and deeply flavorful. They could be eaten without utensils, perfect for guests mingling through reception lines. Church mothers fried batches in home kitchens, timing the cooking so wings arrived warm. The bones made them easier to handle, and children especially loved grabbing them from platters. Wings represented practical generosity, providing protein to crowds without straining budgets. Cold macaroni salad appeared at nearly every 1960s wedding reception, its creamy dressing and tender pasta providing familiar comfort alongside fancier dishes. The macaroni was boiled until soft, then cooled and mixed with mayonnaise, diced celery, chopped onion, and sometimes hard-boiled eggs or pickle relish. Some cooks added bell peppers for color or mustard for tang. The salad was made a day ahead so flavors could meld, served cold in large bowls that stayed on tables throughout the reception. Unlike hot dishes requiring warming trays, macaroni salad was forgiving, staying safe, and tasty for hours. The ingredients were pantry staples that cost little and one batch stretched far. Guests often returned for second helpings. Macaroni salad was the reliable workhorse of wedding buffets, never glamorous but always appreciated. 7-Up cake was the modern marvel of 1960s wedding dessert tables, its light texture and subtle citrus flavor coming from fizzy soda stirred right into the batter. The recipe called for a box of lemon cake mix, vanilla pudding, eggs, oil, and a full bottle of 7-Up that made the cake rise high and stay impossibly moist. Baked in bundt pans, the cake emerged golden and tender, often glazed with powdered sugar and lemon juice that dripped down the ridges. Brides loved it because the recipe was nearly foolproof, producing consistent results even for nervous cooks. The soda was cheap, the mix affordable, and results impressed guests who asked for the recipe. 7-Up cake represented the optimism of the era, embracing convenience products to create something celebratory. It showed tradition and innovation could share the same spread. Fruit cocktail cake stretched a single can of fruit into dessert for dozens, its dense crumb studded with colorful bits of peaches, pears, and cherries. The recipe was simple, mixing flour, sugar, eggs, and baking soda with an entire can of fruit cocktail, including the syrup. The liquid kept the cake moist, while sugars caramelized slightly during baking. Some versions were topped with coconut or brown sugar streusel before going into the oven. The cake was baked in sheet pans for easy cutting, producing squares guests could eat without forks. Canned fruit cocktail was pantry stable and affordable, making this cake accessible to families on tight budgets. The jewel-toned fruit peeking from each slice added color to dessert tables. This was practical celebration baking at its finest, proving resourcefulness and sweetness went hand in hand. Time. Onze, smothered oxtails, brought slow-cooked luxury to 1960s wedding receptions, transforming an inexpensive cut into something guests remembered long after the celebration ended. The oxtails were browned in batches, then simmered for hours in rich gravy made from onions, garlic, tomatoes, and beef broth until meat fell from bones. The collagen melted into the sauce, creating silky richness without expensive ingredients. Seasoned with thyme, bay leaves, and black pepper, the dish filled church halls with an aroma, drawing guests toward the serving line. Oxtails were cheap because most shoppers overlooked them, but African American cooks knew their value. Each piece was meaty enough to satisfy, and gravy stretched the dish over rice. Smothered oxtails represented the alchemy of patience and knowledge, turning what others dismissed into a feast. Peach cobbler bubbled in deep pans at 1960s wedding receptions, its golden crust and sweet fruit filling offering warm comfort to guests celebrating love. The filling was made from canned peaches when fresh were out of season, their syrup mixed with sugar and cinnamon before being topped with biscuit dough or batter that rose during baking. The crust turned golden while the fruit softened and caramelized at the edges. Served warm with vanilla ice cream alongside, the cobbler satisfied without competing with the wedding cake. Canned peaches were affordable year-round, making this dessert accessible regardless of wedding date. Church mothers made cobblers in home ovens, transporting them carefully to reception halls. The dish connected celebration to everyday Southern tradition, its homemade quality telling guests they were fed with care. Homemade butter mints sat in small dishes at every 1960s wedding reception, their pastel colors and creamy sweetness providing the finishing touch to celebration meals. Made from butter, powdered sugar, and peppermint extract, the mixture was kneaded until smooth, then shaped into small rounds or pressed through molds. The mints were tinted pink, green, or yellow with food coloring to match wedding decorations, each delicate enough to melt on the tongue. Women made them days in advance, storing them between wax paper and cool places. The mints cost almost nothing to produce, but looked elegant in crystal dishes borrowed for the occasion. Guests took them after eating, peppermint freshening breath, while sweetness lingered. Making buttermints was a skill passed between generations, young brides learning from mothers and aunts. Salted mixed nuts filled small bowls scattered across 1960s wedding reception tables, their crunch and savory flavor balancing the abundance of sweet dishes. The nuts were bought in bulk, a mixture of peanuts, cashews, almonds, and sometimes Brazil nuts that provided protein and satisfaction between courses. Roasted and salted, they were simple yet essential, giving guests something to nibble while waiting in lines or making conversation. The bowls were placed near punch stations and at corners of food tables where people gathered. Nuts were affordable when purchased in quantities and required no preparation beyond pouring into dishes. Their presence showed attention to detail, understanding that receptions needed variety. Guests reached for them throughout the evening, the familiar tastes grounding celebrations in everyday pleasure. Pickled eggs and beets added vibrant color and tangy flavor to 1960s wedding reception tables, their deep purple hue making them impossible to ignore. Hard-boiled eggs were peeled and submerged in jars of pickled beet juice, where they sat for days, absorbing the sweet, sour brine until whites turned brilliant magenta. The beets were sliced and arranged alongside the eggs, both glistening with vinegar and spices. This dish cost almost nothing since beets were garden staples and eggs always available. The pickling process preserved everything without refrigeration, ideal for long receptions. Guests either loved the tangy sweetness or avoided them, but the colors made them worth including. Women prepared jars weeks in advance for deeper color. Pickled eggs and beets represented the make-ahead planning that successful receptions required. Fried whiting was the budget fish that made 1960s African-American wedding receptions feel abundant without straining family finances. Whiting was cheaper than catfish or perch, sold in bulk at fish markets where church mothers bought pounds for special occasions. The small fish were cleaned, seasoned with salt, pepper, and garlic powder, then dredged in cornmeal and fried until golden and crispy. The flesh stayed flaky and mild, perfect for guests who preferred lighter flavors. Whiting fried quickly and could be kept warm in ovens lined with paper towels. Served alongside hot sauce and lemon wedges, the fish disappeared from platters almost as fast as it appeared. The bones were small enough that experienced eaters navigated them easily. Fried whiting proved that celebration food did not require expensive ingredients. Skillet cornbread came out of cast iron pans, golden and crusty, its edges caramelized where batter met hot grease. This was not sweet, cake-like cornbread, but the traditional version made with cornmeal, buttermilk, eggs, and just enough flour to hold it together. The skillet was heated with bacon drippings until smoking, then batter was poured in with a satisfying sizzle. Baked until the top set and the bottom developed a crackling crust, the cornbread was turned onto platters and cut into wedges. It accompanied every savory dish on the reception table, perfect for soaking up potlikker from greens or gravy from meats. Cornmeal was one of the cheapest pantry staples available, making this bread accessible to every family. The smell of fresh cornbread signaled that guests were being fed with intention and care. Cabbage slaw provided cool crunch to balance the rich, hot dishes that dominated 1960s wedding reception tables. A head of cabbage cost pennies and fed dozens when shredded fine and dressed with mayonnaise, vinegar, sugar, and celery seed. Some cooks preferred creamy versions, heavy with mayo, while others made tangy slaws with more vinegar. Carrots were often shredded in for color, their orange threads brightening the pale green cabbage. The slaw was made the night before so flavors could meld and the cabbage could soften slightly while retaining crunch. Served cold in large bowls, it refreshed palates between bites of fried fish and barbecue. The dish required no cooking, freeing stove space for hot foods needing last-minute attention. Cabbage slaw was the practical workhorse of the buffet, unglamorous but essential. Congealed salad shimmered on 1960s wedding reception tables, its jewel-toned layers showcasing the era's love of gelatin and canned fruit. Boxes of flavored gelatin were dissolved in hot water mixed with canned fruit cocktail or pineapple and poured into decorative molds to set overnight. The result was a quivering, colorful creation that looked more impressive than its ingredients suggested. Some versions included cream cheese for richness, while others stayed clear to showcase suspended fruit. Unmolded onto platters lined with lettuce, these salads drew admiring comments before anyone ate. The gelatin was affordable, canned fruit pantry stable, and presentation required only patience and a mold. Congealed salads represented the optimistic creativity of post-war cooking, where convenience products became vehicles for showing off. Lemon icebox pie offered cool, tangy sweetness that refreshed guests after plates heavy with savory dishes. The filling was simple, combining sweetened condensed milk with fresh lemon juice and egg yolks until acid thickened the mixture without cooking. Poured into a graham cracker crust and chilled until firm, the pie set into creamy perfection that sliced clean and melted on the tongue. Some cooks topped it with meringue, while others preferred whipped cream. The recipe required no oven time beyond toasting the crust, ideal for summer weddings when kitchens were overwhelmed. Sweetened condensed milk was affordable and shelf-stable, while lemons added brightness, balancing richer desserts. Icebox pies could be made days ahead. The cool tartness made guests reach for seconds, proving simple ingredients could rival elaborate confections. Red velvet cake stood tall on 1960s wedding dessert tables, its dramatic crimson layers and snowy cream cheese, frosting commanding attention before anyone took a slice. The batter got its color from red food coloring mixed with cocoa and buttermilk, creating tender crumb that was chocolatey yet distinct. Cream cheese frosting was spread thick between layers, and across the outside is tangy sweetness balancing the cake's richness. Baking red velvet required skill since layers had to be even and frosting smooth. Church mothers who mastered this cake earned reputations lasting decades. The ingredients were not expensive, but the time required made it a labor of love. Red velvet at a reception signaled that hosts had invested effort into the celebration. Its striking appearance made it a worthy companion to the official wedding cake. Cream cheese olive sandwiches appeared at 1960s wedding receptions as delicate finger food that looked fancier than its ingredients suggested. Softened cream cheese was mixed with chopped green olives and sometimes Worcestershire sauce, then spread onto thin slices of white bread. The sandwiches were cut into triangles or rolled into pinwheels, each small enough to eat in 2 bites. The combination of tangy cream cheese and briny olives appealed to adult palates while remaining mild enough for cautious eaters. These sandwiches required no cooking and could be assembled the night before, covered with damp towels to stay fresh. Cream cheese was affordable, and 1 jar of olives stretched across dozens of sandwiches. Women arranged them in careful patterns, turning simple ingredients into visual displays. Corn pudding brought creamy sweetness to 1960s wedding reception tables, its custard-like texture and golden top making it a favorite among guests of all ages. Canned cream-style corn was the base, mixed with eggs, milk, butter, sugar, and a touch of flour before being baked until puffed and set. The edges, caramelized slightly, while the center stayed soft and spoonable, each serving releasing steam that smelled like summer. Some cooks added grated onion for depth, while others kept it sweet. Corn pudding could be made in large casserole dishes that served dozens, stretching inexpensive canned corn into something that felt homemade and special. The dish held well at room temperature, practical for long receptions. Corn pudding represented comfort food, elevated just enough for celebration, familiar yet dressed for the occasion. Homemade dinner rolls filled baskets at 1960s wedding receptions, their pillowy softness and yeasty aroma proving that some traditions could not be replaced by convenience. The dough was mixed from flour, yeast, milk, butter, and sugar, then kneaded until smooth and left to rise in warm kitchens, shaped into rounds and placed in pans to proof again. The rolls doubled in size before baking to golden perfection. They emerged hot and tender, tops brushed with melted butter that glistened under reception hall lights. Rolls were passed in baskets lined with cloth napkins, guests breaking them open to release fragrant steam. They accompanied every dish, perfect for making small sandwiches or soaking up gravy. The ingredients cost little, but the time showed love. Homemade rolls meant someone had dedicated hours to ensure guests ate well.
Salmon croquettes served as mini appetizers were crispy golden patties that children devoured while standing in kitchens, their hands reaching for more before finishing what they were already eating. Grandmothers would drain cans of pink salmon, carefully picking through the meat to remove bones and skin, then flaking the fish into mixing bowls where it was combined with chopped onions, bell peppers, beaten eggs, cornmeal, and seasonings. The mixture was shaped into small patties, pressed firmly to ensure they held together, then carefully lowered into hot oil where they sizzled and turned golden brown. The exterior developed a crispy crust while the interior stayed moist and flavorful. In 1970s, Black households' salmon croquettes were economical elegance, transforming canned fish into something special worthy of holiday tables. Children loved them because they were handheld, didn't require forks, and packed protein and flavor into every crispy bite. Hoppin' John with collards was New Year's Eve tradition that started at Christmas dinner as a promise of good fortune. Black mothers cooked black-eyed peas with rice, smoked ham hocks, onions, and the secret addition of tomato paste that added depth without announcing itself. The peas simmered until tender, then rice was stirred in to absorb the flavorful broth. Collard greens were served alongside, their potlikker mixing with the Hoppin' John on the plate. The combination represented prosperity, peas for coins, greens for paper money. Some families added hot sauce, others preferred vinegar, but the tomato paste stayed universal. The dish was eaten at midnight on New Year's Eve, ensuring the coming year would bring financial blessing. Mothers made extra because leftovers were considered lucky to eat throughout January. The tomato paste addition stayed secret because it created umami that most people couldn't identify but definitely tasted. Sweet rice pudding with raisins was Christmas comfort at its most gentle, a dessert born from thrift and turned into grace. Leftover rice was simmered again in milk until creamy, with sugar, butter, and cinnamon stirred in to bring it to life. Plump raisins softened in the heat, releasing their sweetness into the mixture, while the scent of nutmeg or vanilla filled the air. The pudding thickened slowly, stirred by careful hands that had learned to measure not with cups, but with instinct. Served warm in simple bowls, it was dessert that asked for quiet, for gratitude, for the slow savoring of every spoonful. It tasted of simplicity, of love that didn't shout but lingered softly. For children, it was a treat. For elders, a memory. Sweet rice pudding was more than a way to use what was left. It was proof that comfort could come from the smallest acts of care. In every creamy bite lived peace, patience, and home. Deviled eggs with paprika and pickle relish were the appetizer children fought over at every Thanksgiving gathering, their bright yellow centers dotted with red paprika creating tiny works of art. Grandmothers would boil dozens of eggs the night before, peeling them while warm and slicing lengthwise before scooping yolks into mixing bowls. The yolks were mashed with mayonnaise, yellow mustard, sweet pickle relish, and vinegar until perfectly creamy, then spooned back into egg white halves. Paprika sprinkled on top added color and smokiness. In Black households during the 1970s, deviled eggs symbolized celebration, appearing at every gathering from church dinners to reunions. Children would hover near the kitchen, waiting to sneak one before dinner, knowing that once adults arrived, these treats would disappear. The combination of creamy richness, tangy pickle brightness, and paprika's heat satisfied everyone. Praline sweet potato casserole elevated humble yams into something so decadent that guests forgot it was technically a side dish. Black mothers roasted sweet potatoes whole until their sugars caramelized, never boiling them because that made them watery. The roasted flesh was mashed with butter, brown sugar, eggs, vanilla, and the secret ingredient, bourbon that enhanced without announcing itself. The mixture went into a buttered dish, but the glory lived in the topping. Pecans chopped fine and coarse, combined with brown sugar, flour, melted butter, and cayenne that made the sweetness interesting. Some families added crushed cornflakes for crunch. The casserole baked until the topping bubbled and crisped, creating a shell that had to be cracked with a serving spoon. This wasn't the marshmallow-topped version white families made. This was sophisticated and complex. Mothers guarded the bourbon and cayenne secret because those touches separated their casserole from everyone else's. Turnip green Potlikker soup was the quiet strength of the table, a dish that came not from what was served first, but from what remained after. When the tender greens were eaten, the broth that simmered beneath them, the Potlikker, was saved like treasure. It was dark and smoky, heavy with the flavor of ham bones, onions, salt, and earth. Mixed with a bit of cornbread, rice, or stray vegetables, it became a nourishing soup that soothed hunger and offered comfort. In the old days, elders called it liquid gold, rich not in coins, but in care. It carried nutrients, yes, but also a promise that nothing made with love should ever go to waste. During the cold weeks after Christmas, families gathered around small bowls of Potlikker, sipping warmth that stretched far beyond its ingredients. Each spoonful was humility and hope combined, a quiet meal that spoke volumes about wisdom and endurance. Sweet potato bites topped with mini marshmallows were dessert-like appetizers that blurred the line between side dish and treat, their orange flesh and white topping creating visual appeal that drew children like magnets before dinner was served. Mothers would bake sweet potatoes until soft, then scoop out the flesh and mash it with butter, brown sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, and vanilla extract until smooth and creamy. The sweetened sweet potato mixture was spooned into mini muffin tins or shaped into small balls and placed on baking sheets, each one topped with a single mini marshmallow that would toast golden brown. As they baked, the marshmallows puffed up and turned golden, creating that characteristic toasted flavor that children associated with campfires and summer fun. In the 1970s Black households, these bites represented creativity, taking traditional candied yams and reimagining them as finger foods children could grab. Brandied cranberry orange relish was the condiment that made store-bought cranberry sauce look like a joke. Black mothers made this weeks in advance with fresh cranberries that popped and burst as they cooked with sugar, orange juice, and zest. The secret was cooking them just until they broke down but still had texture, never letting them turn to mush. Once cooled, the relish was spiked with good brandy, enough to taste clearly but not be boozy, plus crystallized ginger chopped fine for heat. Some families added chopped pecans, others used golden raisins plumped in the brandy first. The relish was stored in glass jars where the alcohol preserved it and flavors melded into something more complex. By Christmas, it had transformed, sweet, tangy, warm, with brandy depth that paired perfectly with turkey and ham. Mothers guarded the brandy ratio and crystallized ginger addition because these made their relish memorable. Guests asked for the recipe every year, and every year mothers said it was just cranberries. cabbage and smoked sausage stew was what happened when wisdom met hunger and turned necessity into nourishment. In many kitchens, just one link of sausage was enough to flavor an entire pot, its smoky saltiness seeping deep into the tender folds of cabbage and the soft cubes of potato below. Everything simmered slowly on the stove through the afternoon, filling the home with a smell that felt like safety itself. For Christmas, this humble stew took on special meaning, a dish that stretched small portions into abundance, gathering families around steaming bowls and simple gratitude. The broth was rich without being heavy, each bite balanced between spice and sweetness, softness and strength. No one left hungry, no matter how modest the table. The stew reminded everyone that good food was not about excess, but about intention, about patience and care. Every spoonful carried the echo of firewood crackling, hands stirring, and voices laughing nearby. Cabbage and smoked sausage stew was proof that celebration does not come from wealth, but from the warmth that fills a kitchen when people share what they have. Fried chicken wings with hot sauce and butter created sticky, finger-licking appetizers that had children lined up before dinner was announced, their crispy exteriors giving way to tender meat falling off the bone. Families prepared massive batches on Thanksgiving morning, seasoning them with salt, pepper, garlic powder, and paprika, before dredging in flour and dropping into cast-iron skillets filled with bubbling hot oil. The wings fried until golden brown and crackling crisp, filling kitchens with aromas that drew everyone from every corner. Once drained and still hot, wings were tossed in melted butter and hot sauce, the heat always bold and spicy. In the 1970s, Black households, these wings represented abundance, showing guests everyone was welcome to eat their fill. Children loved them because they were handheld, required no utensils, and delivered maximum flavor with every bite. Brown sugar bourbon ham glaze transformed the Christmas ham from ordinary to legendary, creating a mahogany crust that crackled when carved. Black mothers started with dark brown sugar, maple syrup, and Dijon mustard, but the secret was good bourbon, smooth stuff that added depth without harshness. The glaze was simmered with butter, apple cider vinegar, and blackstrap molasses that gave it caramel complexity. Some families added crushed pineapple, others used orange zest, but every family had their specific ratio. The ham was scored in diamonds, studded with cloves, then basted every 20 minutes, each application building layers of flavor. The glaze pooled at the bottom, mixing with drippings to create sauce so good people sopped it with rolls. This recipe was guarded because it made every other ham taste ordinary. Daughters-in-law asked for it, neighbors hinted, but the measurements stayed in mother's head until she decided you'd earned the right to carry it forward. Molasses candied yams were sweetened by patience, not plenty. When refined sugar was too dear, families reached for homemade molasses or sorghum syrup to coat slices of sweet potato until they glistened like amber. The yams simmered slow in cast-iron skillets, bubbling under a glaze that filled the kitchen with a smell deep as memory. They were tender, caramelized at the edges, and sticky enough to make every bite feel like dessert and blessing at once. Molasses brought something that sugar never could, a smoky sweetness that felt ancient, earthy, and whole. These yams were served alongside meat if there was any, or eaten plain from a spoon when there wasn't. They were comfort, made from soil and struggle alike, proof that sweetness could be drawn from even the hardest ground. In every spoonful was history cooked down to syrup and flame. Bacon-wrapped water chestnuts delivered crispy, salty, and slightly sweet bites that children fought over despite not knowing exactly what water chestnuts were, the bacon exterior and crunchy interior creating mysterious but delicious combinations. Aunties would drain cans of whole water chestnuts, wrapping each one with half a strip of bacon and securing it with toothpicks before arranging them on baking sheets. Before baking, each bundle was brushed with a mixture of brown sugar and soy sauce that caramelized during cooking, creating a sweet salty glaze that coated the bacon. The water chestnuts roasted until the bacon was crispy and rendered, the fat dripping away while the sugar coating turned golden brown and slightly sticky. In Black households during the 1970s, bacon-wrapped water chestnuts represented sophistication borrowed from magazines, recipes that seemed fancy but remained simple for home cooks. Children loved them because bacon made everything better. Secret Spice Eggnog was the Christmas drink that guests begged to replicate but never could. Black mothers made it from scratch with raw eggs, whole milk, heavy cream, and sugar, but the magic lived in the spice blend. Nutmeg was obvious, cinnamon expected, but the secret additions, cardamom, mace, allspice, sometimes clove, created complexity. Store-bought versions couldn't touch. The mixture was cooked gently until it thickened into custard, then chilled overnight. Some families added dark rum or bourbon, others kept it virgin but added vanilla bean and almond extract for richness. The eggnog was served in crystal punch bowls at Christmas Eve gatherings, thick enough to coat a spoon. Children got small cups, adults got generous pours, and everyone tried to guess the secret ingredients. Mothers would smile when guests guessed cinnamon, but the real combinations stayed hidden, passed down only through whispered kitchen conversations when daughters were trusted with family secrets.
Which forgotten wedding dish would you bring back? Drop it in the comments, hit like, and subscribe for more forgotten flavors from African American culinary history.